This is Chris Waddell. Welcome to Living It. I'm with a good buddy, Kelly Smith. Kelly's from Canada. We used to race wheelchairs together. Kelly has a long list of things that he has done. So he was a speed skier, Paralympic silver medalist in the marathon, a free diver, uh, what taught commercial pilot and instructor, an air traffic controller. The thing we really want to talk about right now is he's a paraplegic who is now mountain biking. And he's not mountain biking on four wheels, he's mountain biking on two wheels, regular. I mean, you would not even notice a difference, I don't think, if you saw him. So I want to talk about this. Kelly, first, what made you think that you wanted to get back? And it's back on your old mountain bike, right? That you started on, at least?
Well, I wish that was boy, I'd be killing it in the market or in my bank account if that was my old mountain bike, because I'd be selling it for 30 years. I kind of left that, made it sound like that in one of my videos. But what I meant by that is that I'm back on a bike after 30 years. But that's a 2-year-old Santa Cruz top of the line DH bike. And so I'm not back on my old bike, but I'm back on a bike and loving it.
How does this work? So maybe you need to take us back a little bit just to talk about the situation. So you had a rock climbing accident a long time ago, right? And
yeah.
Incomplete paraplegic. What level, sensation, function? What do you have going on?
Yeah, so I'll take you back. First of all, thank you for, you threw off that list and I started feeling a little bit, excited about all the stuff I'm doing. And half the stuff I've kind of forgotten. Like, wow, I did do that. Yeah, that was me. Wow, that's great, man. I'm going to reconnect to that. Yeah.
Well, I left off driving the Baja bike or the Baja truck too. Yeah. We'll get to that.
I could spend an hour and a half telling you a lot of different crazy stories, but that's what's so cool about you and what you're doing. That's what you're going out and doing and reaching out to people like myself that are pushing the limits and sharing that and opening up people's minds. But I've been fortunate to really have that sort of open range of doing things, and a little bit crazy to want to try and do some of the stuff I've done. But for me, the mountain biking. So when I hurt myself in '91, I was same sort of thing, adventurous, thrill seeker, mountain biking, windsurfing, rock climbing, a lot of different sports. And so I ended up falling rock climbing on a lead climb, and one of those oh shit moments where I kind of went past what I should have been doing and fell about 50, 60 feet off a cliff and ended up with an L1 vertebrae fracture, which almost, I've been pretty fortunate. It's rare to have any sort of muscles below your waist when you break your back, and I have my quads. So I'm L3 paraplegic, which gave me the ability, not very strong, but I can move my quads and I can stand, and I look like a drunk John Wayne when I walk. So I don't walk that much. But at that time, mountain biking was just kicking off. I had my first stealing my brother's mountain bike, actually. It was called the mountain bike. Weighed probably 60 pounds, and it was the first bike that was designed to go off into the bush. And then I upgraded to the Rocky Mountain Hammer after that. And I love mountain biking. It's still my first passion of any sport. I love being out on the trails, and it's that combination of thrill seeking, doing the DH as fast as you can, and the pucker factor of, dodging trees and, riding the rim of a berm or whatever. And then the grunt of going uphill, you got to earn that downhill. So when I had my accident, that sport kind of just became a little unattainable. I give it a shot a few times, I'd see my friends heading off, hitting some trails as the sport evolved, seeing the bikes get better, and I'd be just jealous every time sitting there. So every once in a while, I'd stupidly, jump on a mountain bike and they'd duct tape my feet to the pedals, and we'd just look for a gravity run. But that turned more comical than realistic for me, because half the time I'd just end up on the side of the trail, with duct tape to a bike, with people looking at me going, what the heck is this guy doing, man? This is ridiculous. So it's evolved now with the fact that e-bikes came out, and the technology changed everything for me. And the fact that, pedal assist doesn't work for me. I can't generate enough power. The best I can do is pedal on flats with no resistance, so any resistance, and that's it, I'll fall over if I'm trying to self-propel. So that's when I linked up with a guy out of Seychelles, BC, Bjorn Inga, who is involved in a lot of the cranked bike stuff with the BC boys back in their mountain bike revolution out of Kamloops, BC. And he has now got a company called Crank Bikes, and his e-bike is a little different. It's a mounted motor that goes onto just about any mountain bike frame, and then it goes up to a throttle, connects to your drive chain, just like your regular mountain bike drive chain, and then a throttle. And so that is perfect for me because I can put my very limited power into it. And most of the time I'm not pedaling, or I'm fake pedaling. It looks like I'm pedaling, but I'm not really doing much. And it's the throttle that does everything. And I can book up to 40K with that throttle. It doesn't chew. It's not like a dirt bike, but it has good torque, good speed. And that was my ticket. I saw that and I went, okay, I think this is going to be my avenue to getting back on the bike. It's been a lot more challenging than I thought, and it's had its dicey moments, but yeah, it's been go since I got hooked up with him and his motor.
So what do? You clipless pedals, I'm assuming you clip, or
Yeah.
you clip into your pedals. So you're wearing like regular shoes. So that keeps your legs there and any power output you have. And then you're just sitting on the seat, just same way.
Yep.
You don't have the ability to stand up over jumps or any of that stuff, do you?
I can stand up. I'm just going to reach back here real quick and I'll show you. This was the other key component. So you're right. I do. Duct tape was not going to be the long way to go on this sport. I ended up, those that have AFOs out there, ankle foot orthotics, know that they generally wrap behind your ankle and then, under your foot and give some stability. I went to an orthotics guy and got him to build this one. So my foot slips in this way and this thing does not move. It's bulletproof. It actually looks like a shin protector of some sort. You like the blue tiger leopard skin there? Pretty sexy.
It's important to look good.
It's important. Yeah. You got to have style too. So once we got that dialed in, I slide that into a regular boot. I have to go boot style, which is tricky to get that thing into a boot. So I want to size up and then I clip in. So then my feet are locked to the bike. That's the sketch part, is that my feet are not coming off that thing. Fortunately they do on nasty wipeouts. So I'm not permanently stuck to that thing during, big falls, but it doesn't come off when I'm riding. Never had it kick off or suddenly fall off. And then from there, I'm riding the bike like anybody else. I pad up. I don't care if I'm doing the granny run to the down to the beach or whatever. I've got full armor on, head, shoulders, knees, and 2 or 3 layers under my skinny little butt. As you know, all of us paraplegics went from having a gluteus maximus to a gluteus minimus. So no longer can rely on that big butt muscle to protect my butt. So I've got like this much layer of padding under my ass so that when I sit on it, it's nice and cushy. And you
anticipated my question. I was thinking about my butt and going, okay, I wouldn't want to sit on a mountain bike seat. That sounds like a bad idea. And so your butt is protected and your boys are protected, I'm assuming.
Everything's protected.
Okay, because that would be another worry there.
Absolutely. You're right on the right track. You got to protect the most important parts of the body. I don't mind breaking a leg or an arm, but man, keep the boys happy, keep everything in the right spot down there. And you don't need it being sore unnecessarily. So I actually overpadded the very first time I went out, that skinny little heart mountain bike seat. I went and got, the plastic and cushioning, and my butt was, about this thick underneath me. I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to be all right. But it was like a teeter-totter. I was sitting on that thing and it was unstable as hell. It was like, this is not going to work, man.
Yeah, because you're raised up a little higher. And
way too high. Yeah, I had no control of the bike, so that was too much. So now I have I've researched different padding that's really thin but absorbent and does the trick for me. It's still a little bit, on the long rides it starts to, but that's like any biker. Long rides, everybody's ass gets sore. But I still pad up everywhere else too, because even for a small stop, if I suddenly lose power, or I lose a little bit of balance on some trails, the technical ones are always tough. It's a fall over. It's not a step out like most people. So if I don't have a tree or a buddy nearby, it's So I've taught myself how to fall, with limited injuries, but that's why I'm fully padded like a football player. So it looks funny. People are riding around in shorts and, they got the little umbrellas and, looking like they're, it's like casual day out on the park. And here I go by ripping with a full helmet and, fully geared up like I'm ready for some sort of, full contact mountain biking. But you got to do it. I mean, the whole idea is to ride and be able to ride tomorrow without hurting yourself.
So you're fully geared up, and the thing is, you ride everywhere? I mean, I thought initially that it was just downhill, but are you doing downhill? You're doing uphill? What kind of riding are you doing?
Well, that was the key. This is, so my evolution of mountain biking really started with the idea of, okay, I'm going to get out on a mountain bike again. So prior to the e-bikes, like everybody else, I was trying the four-wheelers. I was trying the three-wheelers, the one similar to the one-off that you did Kilimanjaro on and stuff. And they're all, they all are specialized and good in certain areas, but all limiting. And even this has its limits too. But what I found with the four-wheeler and the three-wheelers was that I still needed either too much help from friends or I needed too much gravity. It was very limited on the trails that I could hit. You'd have to go and research and find out where you could ride. I wanted to have freedom, either to ride by myself or ride the same trails as my friends. And so, again, that was that e-bike, this connection, getting back onto two wheels, worth the risk, as far as the crashes go. And then I started to see other people doing it with the buckets. There'd be people doing gravity runs with buckets, and that's cool too. But again, you're limited to gravity. So with this one, yeah, I'm riding everything. I do all the rides that my friends do, and it's only limited to my ability to navigate the technical. And that's like anybody else. You got to navigate. You have to have the ability to ride the trail. And it has its challenges because you have a mountain biker has that ability with keep their gravity, their center of gravity low and drive with your legs so that, you're controlling the bike and you can go slow and fast. My problem with going, especially uphill, is that you have this powerful motor and it's very sensitive. So when I'm going uphill and doing technical stuff, it's very easy to pop a wheelie. It's very easy to lose control of the bike and then end up off the trail. And if you're going up something technical through rocks or switchbacks, that's where I've had a zillion, if 90% of my crashes have been going uphill through technical stuff, just because I pop a wheelie and I lose my line or I lose balance. And but I love the freedom. That's why I keep doing this, is because of the freedom of riding any trail I want. Now, I'm pushing the limits. I would still say this is very doable for anybody that wants to give it a try, even if they don't even have the leg power that I have. A bucket would get you set up on, with your feet clipped in, a nice cushy, bucket if you don't go my style, which is just padding, put a bucket on. I'm actually here right now in Golden, BC, with a friend of mine that's just kind of taking up management in this beautiful lodge that's surrounding me right now with mountains in the area. And the trails here are perfect. There's some millions of little blue trails. And then if you want to get more adventurous, you can continue all the way up to Kicking Horse Resort, which has got some diamond runs and some DH stuff. And so I'm kind of here right now exploring, but I'm just looking at this place going, holy crap, this will be an amazing place to host an event here, adapt event. They do have a new trail that they're actually designing right now and just finishing, which is a full adaptive one for the four-wheelers. So lots of opportunity here right now, and I'm stoked about the fact that I'm here to hit some new trails.
So let's take just a little step back, because the first thing you think about when you're talking about a two-wheeled bicycle is balance.
Yep.
What's the balance like? Because you talk about the technical stuff. You've kind of jumped ahead on us. What's the balance like? And what was it like to start off?
Oh, you hit it right there. You hit it right there. Because it had been a long time. It had been a long time since I even got on with, duct tape and on a mountain bike. And so when I got this thing all dialed in, clipped in, and I went for a short ride with some friends on a skinny little trail, I felt like a giant. You're sitting in your wheelchair and you get accustomed to this height for so many years that this is normal. As soon as I got on that trail, it looked like a long way down to the ground for my wipeouts. And I felt so, that's also when I patted myself too much. I felt so sketch. I was having a tough time staying on a very basic trail. I really felt like, kind of, you put a 2x4 in the ground and you can walk across it and you throw it up at 10 feet and it starts feeling a little bit sketchy. That was me. I was sitting on that bike, not feeling, the balance just wasn't there. What I realized, though, first of all, was that, like our evolution of being in a chair, you do everything from your upper body, like everything you control is from your upper body. That's not a good balance point for a mountain bike, so I had to slowly transfer my weight down to my feet and really transfer my weight down to my butt and allow myself to flow through a lower center of gravity. Once I started to relax and not try and muscle this, the steering of the mountain bike from my upper body and started working on balance points and balance of the bike, then it got easier and easier. And I have to constantly remind myself of that. When I go into an area where balance is everything, like going across little logs, they set up on those trails, those, kind of boards and logs that you gotta go across, and those ones always sketch me out. Right? My center of gravity goes right up again, and then I'm sketch, ready to wipe out. So it's tough. It takes a long time, and I'm still working on that, getting my center of gravity low.
Well, it's a mental battle as well, right? I mean, that
Completely.
sounds like the
Yeah.
big thing.
Yeah.
And the thing is, because you don't have the ability to effectively abort, right? I mean, it's like you don't have the ability to just jump off the bike and be okay. Like it's you are committed going uphill, you're committed going downhill, you're committed, and the faster you go, the greater risk you take, and the worse
Yeah.
the wipeouts can be potentially. And so I'd imagine that's part of the intrigue for you.
Absolutely. I mean, I love the thrill of it. Love riding that edge. I have tried to tweak my risk to reward filter that's on me. That's what got me in a chair. That's what gets me in trouble all the time is I don't have a good risk reward filter. I'm always ready to push the limits, even for the not so great rewards for what I've done. I mean, it's the thrill seekers, right? That is the key to thrill seeking is what is your risk reward on it. So I've dialed that back a little bit because I'm trying to stay on the bike and not in a hospital. But yeah, I've hit some, but you're committed. You're fully, once I've clipped into that bike and I start moving down a trail, I'm either full on looking at the course, looking at the trail, staying the line, and every once in a while taking a peek if there's a tree that I can grab onto if I'm getting a little bit, like needing a rest or whatever. I'm always scaling ahead. One, to ride the trail as fast as I can, but two, particularly, I mean, DH, you're already set up. You know it's going to flow unless it's a technical one. But when you're doing cross country, I'm always kind of, keeping that in the back of my head. If I can't do this, what's my out? Is it a wipeout or is it a tree or something else?
Is it mentally exhausting?
In a good way. It's mentally, you're staying focused for sure. I wouldn't say exhausting, but just mentally, vibed on because I've noticed that when I stop, if I try and just go with the flow and forget about that, that's where I usually end up in a crash. One of my worst crashes is a perfect example of that. We did an 8-hour ride. It wasn't meant to be 8 hours, but we were up in Whistler and we were doing a ride up a run called Into the Mist, and then it was going to go down Lord of the Squirrels. Huge, really cool run. Takes you up into the tundra of Whistler, beautiful views, but a lot of technical spots to this. And I'd probably wiped out 40 times trying to get through the uphill switchbacks and stuff, to the point where I tore my tricep too many times reaching out, trying to brace myself as I fell. That's my new adjustment. Don't stick your hand out. But we were coming up on a ledge. It was really intimidating because it was a ledge, trail, ledge. And, I kind of just lost my focus. We'd been riding for 6 hours at that point, and I lost my focus, kind of relaxed. And next thing I know, I'm losing balance and heading over this, 68-foot drop off into the rocks. And I was with a couple of guys from France that were, we'd met and were riding with us. And he came, jumped up. I mean, we were going fast. He jumped off his bike and, saw this happening, went to grab me, and all it did was take him down with me. So, it was nasty. I'm just thankful that one didn't turn into a much worse wipeout. My bike went 20, 30 feet down the cliff and landed perfectly. I think it did like a perfect gymnastic flip, somehow clipped out of me. I still don't know how to this day how my bike clipped out of me and landed wedged between two rocks on the tires, not a scratch on the bike. And I'm sprawled across rocks like this, looking mangled. But yeah, I can't take the focus off. You got to just be confident and stay the line. Just, you know, you got to, when it's technical like that, it's all about not backing off. It's stay the course, keep your balance.
Easier said than done, though, right? I mean, that's the objective of every single sport is, well, just stay focused. I mean, like, look ahead, plan ahead. We're going to make it all work. Stay focused,
Yeah.
and stay committed to what you're doing. But then as soon as you get afraid or as soon as you get tired, you back off or your mind drifts. And so that's where I'm saying it's got to be exhausting on the, you know, on the mental, emotional kind of side of things. So I mean, you've done so many things that that really are taking a lot of risk. I mean, I didn't know until recently that you'd been a speed skier and you're on the Canadian national team as a speed skier. Can you describe to people what speed skiing is? And maybe you can tell us how fast you went. We'll do the conversion into miles per hour if we need to.
Yeah, I could share a little bit. I was just getting another one of those ones I really just got into when my accident sort of curtailed that one. But I've always enjoyed speed. You know, I love the thrill of, you know, pushing limits on the speed side and speed skiing. You know, you go out skiing and you're carving nice big turns. And I linked up with a bunch of crazy Canucks that introduced me to the sport of speed skiing. And I mean, they're doing speeds way faster than I ever did now. And even then I was still just kind of getting going as far as how fast the sport was. So the top guys now are doing 230, 240 kilometers an hour, which is, I don't know, 140 miles an hour, 150 miles an hour, something like that. It's fast. It's up there. I think the world record at my time was between 120 and 130 miles an hour when I was speed skiing. I hit just over 100, about 108, 110 miles an hour on one of my runs up in Whistler. And another thing that's just, it's a pure rush. You know, first of all, it's the mental game of standing on top of a very steep run. And typically you're either standing on the slope and you're looking down going, oh my God, I'm going to tuck this whole thing. That's insane. Or when I was in Sweden, we had this run, Hundfila, it's Dog Mountain. And the run starts off gentle, and then it's literally a drop off right after that.
Elevator shaft, yeah.
Yeah, you're starting at the start, and you don't see the bottom. You just see this freaking drop off in front of you. What a thrill when you roll over top of that, and you hit. As soon as you hit over 100 miles an hour, you're starting to get to this point where you're floating on the, on the snow, and there's pockets of air under your skis. If you've ever seen speed skis, they're big planks. And eventually you start hovering, over the snow, and you have to just gently tilt your skis inwards like this, so that you're running a little bit of an edge. Because if you stay flat, you get all fishy. So
skis start to swim around, and then
exactly. Yeah. And so that's, so you're holding this tuck and you just feel like a jet. You can, when people go by, you're a spectator watching a speed skier, it's literally a jet going by, because you're just breaking through the air so quickly. And then when you stand up, man, it's like jumping out of a plane, like a parachute. You just go like this and you lean into the air and it's just, it was fun. It was, I got up to somewhere around 108, 110 miles an hour on one of my runs.
Which is enough to grab your attention, that's for sure. And so speed skiing is literally just steep slope. You're going straight. There are no turns. You go straight, and then there's a run out or a place where you just throw them sideways and just stop. And you've got the full rubberized suit. You've got the fairings on your boots and on your helmet. Bent poles. You're running 225 centimeter. Yeah, exactly. 225 centimeter skis. Is that what you're? Yep. So you're running
225. You got the full fairings. I love aerodynamics too. I think that's the other reason I liked it. I was in there. They knew me as the tech guy, and I mean, which, you know, that sport was full of a lot of crazy guys. None of them really got into the tech side. They just had, they just had a really high risk factor, thrill factor that, drove them to the sport, which was me too. But I also like the tech side, and I like winning, so I went into the dialing in of the snow. I knew everything about snow and what wax. I had my fairings dialed in, came from, I was not a pilot at that point, but I had a lot of aerodynamic interest and a little bit of knowledge around that. So I was dialing everything in. I even went at one point, I got into an air show. I connected with the organizer of an air show, and he let me run down the runway, because part of training in the summer is to practice your tuck and limit the drag of your tuck. So a lot of speed skiers do that on top of cars. And, get on a car that's doing over 100 miles an hour, and you practice, and they do the videoing. I didn't have access to an air tunnel anyways, but so that was my way of doing it, promoting the sport. So I went to a local dealer. We worked out, he got me on top of a car, one of the sports car with racks, and I was in an air show doing about 130 miles an hour down a runway on top of a car in my tuck. It was just ridiculous. Yeah, I still have the brochure from that particular event, and it's pretty hilarious. I'm coming off the runway, standing in my speed suit, looking like an alien, man. It was pretty funny.
Well, so far out of context too. This is the middle of the summer, and
Yep.
you were in a winter sport coming off the top of a car. But that's the cavalier nature of the sport too, isn't it? Like, let's figure out how to do it, and it's not super scientific. I mean, obviously there are people who I'm sure who are figuring out their waxes and the grinds, like the pattern that you put into your skis.
Very important. That well too, very well, coming from your ski background and performance side of that. Yes, very, very key. I mean, top speed is everything. And when you're getting into, these events where, between first and 10th place is, 0.1, 0.01, speeds, everything comes down to the tuck and your wax and just everything.
Yeah. And you just need to be aerodynamic. And what does it feel like to do a speed skiing run? Obviously jitters at the beginning, but what happens? Talk us through what a speed skiing, and how long is the run and all of that stuff.
Well, it depends on the run. For me on speed skiing, I always seem to take the sport beyond my ability. I was a good skier, but not a great skier. And so I was really good at the tuck, really good at, just everything I needed to do to be as fast as I could. In some of my first events, I was placing in the top 5 against guys that been doing it for a while. My problem was I sucked at stopping at high speed, and that's not a good thing to do. That's the wrong skill not to have when you're doing over 100 miles an hour. I don't stop very well. So, some of these ones had really nice long runouts. All you had to do is stand up and decelerate. But there were others, just like in a DH, and I'm sure you've had those, where you get to the bottom, you get through the finish line, and it's not a long run out. You got to decelerate and then crank a big turn and get to a stop pretty quick. So those courses, my nerves were really high, because I was thinking way too much about the bottom and not so much about my run. If it was a good, run out at the bottom, then I'm calm, like I really felt, good about everything that I was about to go. I never worried about wiping out. I just worried about, the stop, but focusing on what I needed to do, getting my tuck, get into a nice tight tuck and let the skis run. And I don't know, I think in a lot of sports, when you're dialed in, it's a vacuum. It's kind of like in wheelchair racing. You got your pre-jitters, you've got all the prep stuff that you do. But for me, I was definitely one of those people that as soon as the gun went, I was in my own vacuum. All my nerves kind of went away, and I just focused on the moment. And that was the same for speed skiing. But the thrill really comes when, you're running it out at the end and you're standing up. It's the pre and the post for me anyways. Because during, I'm just so much of a vacuum that it kind of is what it is. It becomes a blur.
Was it physically demanding or not?
No. The only time it was physically demanding when you had to haul those. There's a few places where you couldn't get to the top of the event by lift, so you had to sling those 225s over your shoulder with a rubber suit, that you're wearing, take half of it off around your waist, but you'd have to hoof to the top. You know what that's like, trying to hoof in snow with gear. So that's your biggest workout. The rest, people, the run is maybe, God, it's not very long, 10, 20 seconds, something like that. So holding your tuck's not hard. It's not like you get leg burn like in a DH run where you're cranking turns and, coming out of your tuck and holding the line. Physically, it really doesn't take much. It's, just it's technique. It's all technique and getting the right tuck. And the only physical demand is at the end if you have to do a hard stop or something. Interesting though, you were talking about the mental side of it. The worst. So I have seen some ugly crashes, and there's two things that, are ugly about speed skiing. Most of the time when you wipe out, you just slide forever. You're in this rubber suit, the skis kick off, and you just slide down this straight course. So it's not too dangerous. When it gets dangerous though, is when you're going so fast that the rubber starts to melt to your skin. And that's not fun. Or
so you have to keep moving, right? You can't be on one, you can't sort of on one leg, you're sort of rotating, trying not to.
But I would assume that, yeah, you're going to try and control that a little bit. You're going to end up with a nasty road rash that either way. I had one friend though that wiped out bad at the bottom, and the ski 225, so torque off of that, if it doesn't kick off the way you want, it just snaps your legs, and that's what happened to him. That much speed, that 225, you got those things cranked to the max, just stay in them, don't know why. And he shattered his leg really, really bad. So the wipeouts are generally no big deal, but when they are a big deal, they're ugly. They're really ugly.
Well, that resistance, that air resistance is a big deal too, right? It's like you stick your hand out the window when you're driving down the highway. That's what you're feeling. Because I mean, like I've been in a wind tunnel, and it's actually tiring. You do 3 or 4 minutes or something like that. And I think maybe 3 minutes was the most that we did. And they're trying to tune in your tuck and your aerodynamics and everything. We've got 60 miles an hour of wind blowing at you. You're not going anywhere.
No. But, that's where the suits are so good. You got those, like I say, Darth Vader helmets on you. You've got the rubber suit. You're in this tight tuck, and you're adjusting every little thing, even fingers. Where am I finger? Am I holding it here? Am I holding it here? Am I rounding my shoulders? Am I doing this? How much squat do I want? Even arching your back. All those little adjustments change the way that the air comes off your back. That's the big thing. It's not so much how it hits you. How does it spill off your back? Because if it spills with turbulence, you're slowing down. If it flows off of you, there's quite a bit to aerodynamics in creating that bullet flow that comes off around you and then flows off of you. You create that shape, that's where you go fast. Then you combine that with the right wax and stuff. So when you're in the tuck, other than if there's a gust of wind or something, you can hold the tuck pretty good. It's when you transition from that to standing up, because you're in this in a nice tight tuck and everything's streamlined. And then when you stand up, it's probably more impactful than a parachute jump, because you don't hit terminal a lot unless you're in a tuck. Most of the time you're like this when you're parachuting, and which, I've done a few times too.
Flying squirrel kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like this, but even without the flying squirrel, just free fall, you're like this. So you're taking on the air resistance. If you go into a tuck when you're jumping out of a plane, you would pick up more velocity. So when you're in a tuck, you're doing the same thing. You're hitting a higher velocity than what a skydiver would in his normal sort of spread form. So when you stand up and transition to that, it's like getting punched in the face, and you got to be ready for it.
Well, aerodynamics became a big part of what you did in wheelchair racing too. I mean, you were pretty tight in there with the aerodynamics, just a clean running chair. Was that part of what helped you in Athens? So silver medal in the marathon in Athens, but that was a fairly hilly course too. I'd imagine there were some downhills, but there were some uphills, which is really where things are often determined.
Yeah, Athens was all about the uphill. It was 10K flat, 20K uphill, and then 10K downhill. So it was very much focused on climbing, so I was medium to bigger size guy really in wheelchair racing because of my, having a little bit of leg muscle. So I weighed in my leanest, I was 140 pounds in Athens. And the guys that I had to beat that were good hill climbers were all between 100 and 110 pounds, Kurt Fernley and that crew, Aaron Gordian, all 100 to 100. So they had 30 pounds on me minimum. So I had to really focus on, for Athens, power to weight ratio. I just had to be the strongest climber I possibly can. And, through my career, that's what I think I proved, was that, pound for pound, I was probably one of the best climbers out there. And I focused on that. I thrived for it, being able to really push the uphills and push through the pain. Peachtree, was one of those races where, I was able to showcase, that strength of mine as far as road racing went. But the aerodynamics, that was focused on Boston, because Boston's such a big downhill course, and it's, to win that one, you got to be aerodynamic. And so, just one of those evolutions. I kind of like that I left a little bit of a legacy maybe in that whole part of pushing the limits of aerodynamics and bringing carbon into the sport. And now all the top chairs are carbon. So a little bit maybe history there.
Do you have, so silver medal in Athens, and that was one, did you guys ever run together? Were you in a pack, or, it looked like from the results that everybody was all spread out.
Yeah, well, that's because of the hill. So the first 10K was insane. We had Ernst van Dijk go out super hard because he knew he wasn't necessarily the best hill climber, and he wanted to break away from the pack early. So we literally came out of the start of that race hitting 40K coming off the start line, like it was a sprint. It was insane. He was trying to break away right away. So, but when you've got, 60 guys that are super fit, at the top level, it's really hard to break away. Even at 40K, they just strung out, like 200 meters of aero, people tucking in behind each other and using the draft. So
breaking it down in Athens, you had, it was all spread out. So how did the race, because this is kind of cool, right? If there's a marathon that you want to win, it's the one in Athens, right? Where the original, it's the original marathon, right? Like this is, yeah.
And I wish I could say I brought home the gold on that one, but I can say that, I still feel pretty proud about the silver, being, like I said, that I was up against the wall, not being, it really was going to be a light guys race with the 20K hills. But I'd planned for Athens probably 4 years. That Athens marathon was on my mind to stand on the podium. And so, like I said, my training was all for 4 years focused on power to weight ratios and climbing and so forth. And but the race, getting back to it, the first 10K was just a pack of we ended up breaking into 2 packs, but even the front pack was probably 20, 25 racers that were just chained out. And I can remember sitting in the pack with Kurt Fernley, who the guy I was, really focused on mostly as far as the hill climbing, because we've gone toe to toe many times in different races. And I knew what a strong hill climber he was. So my goal was to either stay with him or to stay close enough that when we got over the hills, that I could somehow either overtake him or, to catch up to him on the last 10K downhill. But we were a pack of 20-25 going up to the start of the first hill, because it was all flat 10K up to that point. And Kurt took off, and I felt it was too soon to make that surge, at least for me anyways. And I kind of picked my pace. And I love this one picture that my brother took that was in one of the lead vehicles. You got a picture of me, and I remember it's kind of like I was telling you, get into this vacuum when you're racing or you're doing something that requires your focus. And I was in my vacuum. I'd forgotten about anybody behind me. Didn't care. I picked my pace. I picked what I felt was good, and that pace just happened to be faster than anybody else wanted to do. And you can see this chain of about 20 guys behind me on the first hill. And I can remember getting to the top of that hill and looking behind me, and nobody was there. I'm like, well, that's a good sign. That's really good.
Feeling strong. Yeah.
That's good. I like the sign of that. Kurt was still ahead of me, but the rest of the pack was gone. And from there, it was really just picking my pace, because he had 20K of uphill. It was like rolling uphills. And I really thought I was going to catch Kurt, because I had a good pace, and I had, I hit 67K on one of the DHs going down, because there was a couple of, spots where you go over this hill, roll down for, a few hundred meters and then start the climb again. And thought for sure I was going to catch him. But as it was, I mean, I talked to Kurt later and he said he was pushing that hill as hard as he could, because he knew that once the hills were done, that there was a chance I could reel him in. And it was like he was being chased by a dragon or something. He said, I felt like, I was not going to let up. I knew you were back there, sort of thing. So it was fun. It was not one of those races that come down to a tactical finish between a pack. It was really about how well did you climb those 20K of the hills.
Yeah. What a difference between there and then Beijing 4 years
Mm-hmm.
later, where it was just dead flat and it was this gigantic pack of guys who are all in the same thing.
Yeah.
What's the mentality of a marathoner? Is a wheelchair mentality, do you think that's different than a runner, or more like cycling?
I think anybody that you have to, I think in being a marathoner, any sport that requires that you're going to go and put more than an hour of effort in, especially at a competitive level, you have to love it. You have to love grinding it. It's almost a zen. When I would train to do the long distance, it was a zen for me. I loved being in that moment of pushing my body to the limit and holding that for as long as I could, and getting in a zone. You'd be on this verge of, overdoing it, but listening to your body and just being in that moment, and I think those are still some of my greatest highs, is not so much the racing, but some of the training sessions I had where I'd be out there, really pushing my limits and seeing your body respond. But it really is a zen. And I think that's the first thing that any marathoner in any sport, whether it's running, cycling, wheelchair racing, you love that being on the road and getting into that vacuum of performance with your body, your equipment, and just, the training you're doing.
Is that what you miss? Do you miss the training?
I miss not hurting. I mean, that was a good hurt back then. Like you'd push the limits and it'd be like, oh, that's a hurt, but that's a good hurt. Those sore muscles that your body responds. I miss being that fit, but mostly I just miss how my body responded to the training. It's tough, like I'm eating as well as I possibly can. I'm doing all the right things, but Father Time, he always wins in the end. And so, I can feel it. I can feel the joints and the muscles and, the fatigue. So it's kind of that balance of still pushing the limit, staying fit, but recognizing that my body's not going to recover the way it used to. So I'm not going to stop until I drop, but I have to be smart to keep some sort of, longevity going still.
So interesting kind of thing. Your brother ended up jumping into a racing chair as well. Your brother, Kevin, who able-bodied guy, thought it looked cool, wanted to do it. Your roommate, Jen, at that time, jumped into a racing chair, and these guys, and they trained. I mean, it wasn't like they actually got out there and started training with you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What was the appeal for them?
Well, we had a really good supportive community there. That was back when the wheelchair racing series in BC, or that started in Vancouver with Steve Milam. That's how I got even into racing, with Steve Milam in the wheelchair racing community, and it was a very open and supportive community. At one point, we got up to probably 18, which it doesn't seem like a large number, but in a small little pack, that's a pretty good number. And close, I'd say 6 of them were able-bodied. And for us, it was about breaking down those barriers, perceptual barriers, and saying, this is a sport. Let's stop looking at it as a disabled sport. And if people want to get in a chair and race with us, let's do that. Jeff Adams, who, I trained with for years and great, loved that guy. But, he really was a great spokesman for the sport. And I learned so much from him. And that was one of the things that he really pushed as well, was the inclusivity, and this is a sport. Let's get everybody in a racing chair, and let's let the best person win. It's not about whether you're disabled or not. It's about here's another sport, and this is the equipment we use. And so that was our mentality, and that was we had my brother, we had Jen, we had a good 3 other people. So when we had Give It a Go days, we literally opened it up to everybody, and it created a larger community, for us, which is a win for everybody. It created a few issues along the lines, you know, because there were still some people that didn't understand that. You know, I think that's the problem with the world today is we jump too quick to form an opinion without really knowing the backstory or understanding the full picture of issues. You know, social media, people jump way too quick. They need to take a step back and learn. But now,
Well, they were actually at a disadvantage, really. I mean, if you
totally,
try to take,
yeah,
because the way that we were sitting, you're basically kneeling on
hmm,
your legs. So you're in this yogi kind of position where your heels are touching your butt and your chest is on top of your quads, which is a really good. I did a race a long time ago in Boston, and a guy who wrote for Runner's World wanted to do an experiential article.
yeah,
We trained in it, and it was a 5 miler or something like that. And he went and trained in a racing chair, and he came out and he did this 5 miler. And predictably, he wasn't all that fast, but he was, you know,
no,
he did it. But when he finished, he got out of the chair and his legs had fallen asleep. And so he couldn't stand up, you know.
absolutely,
So you look at it and go, oh, well, these people are able-bodied. They should be better off than the
no,
rest of the people, but they weren't. And the funny thing about, I mean, the great thing about Kevin and Jen was they were in it enough that they qualified and they raced Boston. They
yep,
raced the Boston Marathon, which is the biggest, really the biggest road race in the world, right? I mean, I think
yeah,
it probably is, and certainly for the wheelchairs it is. And to me, I looked at that and thought that was so cool. And Jen, really cool as well, right? Because she had
yeah,
qualified as a runner and then
and
qualified the next year as a wheelchair racer.
yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, you know, and I mean, the sad part about it, as you know, with the Boston one was that, you know, exactly within our community of racers, everybody knew about Kev and Jen. They'd been to other races. We always called the event organizers to let them know that, hey, we got a couple of able-bodied racers that are in chairs. We support it. We encourage it. This is an inclusive sport. We want people to see it as a sport, not a disabled sport. So we were always really proactive about creating that awareness so that there was no surprises. But you can't reach out to everybody. You can't make everybody aware. And we did the same through Boston. We called ahead and we said, we got a couple able-bodied, you know, my brother, and we talked to the organizers and they're like, oh yeah, no, if they're using a chair, they're using a chair and you guys support it, you support it. But that's not how it ended up, you know, because not everybody had got the memo on that this was cool. And it's so funny how the whole thing turned out, and sad because we had an opportunity to really break down some perceptual barriers. And what happened was that at the start of the race, Kev and Jen are getting ready. And of course, they're walking around, they're prepping their chair, they're doing their stuff. Well, that already with Boston, like you say, being such a high profile sport, there was people seeing this and spreading the word. Oh my God, there's a couple able-bodied people walking around getting in the chairs. What the heck? Why are they cheaters? You know, like they thought these were cheaters. How do you, if you're faking, trying to sneak into an event because you have an advantage, which they don't, like you said, would you just blatantly walk around? But you're not sneaking. So anyway, they got in their chairs, they raced, and when they got to the finish line, both of them were pulled over and disqualified for being able-bodied. It was so crazy. Reverse, you know, um, just nuts. Jen cried because she worked so hard to be part of this, and it's so supportive. But for her, that was an emotional moment. She had just, that is a grueling race. It was a tough day too. You know, there
It was
was
a
winds
headwind
out
that
there.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very tough day. And she gritted through it. Both of them did. And then to get to the finish line and they pull you aside and call you a cheater and disqualify you, that is just so disheartening. It was so wrong. And the media ran all over it, you know, like they were, you know, complete, you know, bad people. And we tried to defend them as much as possible. And a lot came out. But really, if the news had just called and talked to the community first and said, hey, you know, like, did you guys know this? Is it cool? We could have had a really, really great sport about inclusivity and breaking down perceptual barriers. But instead, it just ran with the media that they were cheaters and snuck in. And, you know, like, what were they doing? Grabbing the chair and throwing it over their shoulder and running up the hills? I just don't get it. They were at a disadvantage, you know. But yeah, unfortunate event. But I think there was still a lot of good conversation that came out of it.
Well, it's one of those, because the assumption is that the more able you are, the faster you're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the unfortunate part is it does the individual a huge disservice, right? So there's no adaptability, there's no training effect, there's no
It takes away.
strategy or whatever. I mean, you said that you did a lot of marathons, and if you're doing a marathon in our time, you're thinking, okay, well, what's the wheel I want to get on? I want to get behind Heinz Fry, right? Had his he had his knees up around his ears. He was a high level para, and had
Yeah,
this crazy like sort of spider type stroke that was going on. But he had
yeah,
a heart that was probably as big as a basketball. And but I mean, like, you don't give somebody like that credit. I remember watching, and I think
yeah,
you were in the race. It was Swiss Nationals. It must have been 2000, I think it was, and they were doing the demonstration, the semifinals and stuff like that, the quarters and semis for the demonstration event for the 1500 demonstration. Everybody was there, and then
yeah.
running the 5K, there was a big wind, and so every time there was a tailwind, Heinz would go and just wind it up, and
With
you had Saul and Krieg, and you had all the and Ernst and all the big guys who were just looking at him like, oh, please, 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 like, don't go like that on this run, like that, not on this lap, like, give us a break. And then he'd go back to the back, and then he'd wind it back up and just trying to take everything out of it. And talking about the able-bodied people, it's like, oh, okay, so they're taking advantage of these poor disabled people, and
oh gosh, yeah.
only have so much in their lives, and give them this one
Mm,
thing. And it's like, but can you see that they're there for the
yeah,
joy of the sport, the beauty of the sport, and they've worked really, really hard to get here,
exactly.
and they're not taking any prize money or anything. And if they did, I mean, that would be it would be an interesting conversation to have at that point. But it was really, I think it was a lost opportunity. I mean, there's so many
Absolutely.
different
That's people want to be righteous and protect us. They want to protect that community that they feel they have to protect. And yes, wheelchair racing began as an opportunity for people with disabilities, but it doesn't have to remain in that pigeonhole of disabled sport. It grew to a point where this is a sport that a lot of people could enjoy. And it is not easy for an able-bodied person, like you described, to stuff themselves into that can and push with their arms. And they put a lot of work into to achieve what they were able to do. And there is an absolute disadvantage, no advantage. I mean, even to break it down to within the sport, we classify, in the para division between those that have, as yourself, were T53 and I was a T54. And the basic difference is, do you have back and ab muscles? Because certainly in the sprints, that ability to move your trunk and generate more power can make a big difference in the sprint. But they've combined everything from the 1500 up. And if we look right now at the 1500 and some of the other distances, some of the T53s are the world record holders, the ones that have less ability. It's all about training. It's all about, dialing in everything that you've done, from your equipment to your training to that stroke count to that contact. It ain't about having legs. It's about everything you've done to train for that moment. And that was the opportunity we had right there to really open up the sport and get people to see what the sport really was about. It's not about just being disabled and having an opportunity. It's about being competitive in a racing wheelchair. Doesn't matter what your ability is, able-bodied or not.
No, it's about the sport. And I look at it, I look at like the Spud Webbs of the world, who 5'5" or whatever in the NBA, who could go and dunk. And you're like, that is so cool. Like, you see
Mm-hmm.
somebody who supposedly
Exactly.
is not supposed to win a race. And it was funny, like, you look across the starting line at a wheelchair race, and for somebody who's sort of uneducated, they're like, oh, well, that guy, he's the guy who's going to win, who just looks like Schwarzenegger back in the
Yeah.
day or something. And
Yeah.
then you look at a Heinz Fry who looks like, somebody's
The
professor,
machine.
bespectacled,
Yeah.
uh, bald guy who just sort of looks kind of skinny and unassuming. And you're like, yeah, but that's the guy with the motor, or, you can figure it out, but it's kind of funny. Very few people, if it was
Yeah.
a betting sport, if it was like horse racing, could go and go, number seven. Number seven's definitely the
Yeah.
one. That's the one I'm going for. And that's the cool part. You were such an
Yes.
amazing ambassador of the sport. I don't know if you're even aware of this. So we would take, I mean, before you were fully all carbon and decked out, we'd take our chairs through the airport and bring it to the gate, and it'd be the last thing on and the first thing off. And your racing chair hopefully would be treated well. And invariably, as you're going through the airport, you get, how fast can that thing go? How
Yeah.
fast can that thing go? You know, and you answer a few, you know, I answer a few people, and eventually I get a little bit more cryptic where I'm like, you know, it depends on the size of the motor. And they're like, well, there's a motor on it? I'm like, yes, that's me. I am the
That's me.
motor. You know, which now when I bring mine through, I'm like, yeah, it's grossly underpowered. This is a problem. It's not good. But you would stop and you would talk to every single person along the way. Was that conscious, and what were you trying to do?
Thanks for mentioning that. I mean, you're right. I mean, I don't really put a lot of thought into it, but I think if I rewind that a little bit, you know, we all go through you know, those of us that had an accident at some point in our life and sort of had to make this adjustment to our new life. You know, it's an interesting transition. You have an opportunity to be insightful and learn a little bit about yourself, see society from a different level. And when I had my accident, you know, I think the biggest challenge I had, I looked at the disability part as just a new adventure. And so I started, you know, tackling that right away as best I could. If I walked again, I walked again. If I got, you know, fully recovered, great. But whatever happens, I'm going to drive forward and I'm going to maximize my ability through whatever adventures, you know. So I was going to find my path.
And you're okay with that right away?
Well, I wouldn't say I was okay with it. But I was up for the challenge. You know, like I can remember my second night in the hospital where I, you know, they'd done the back surgery. As you know, your first challenge once you had back surgery is pain, because they've stabilized your back. You're not going to screw that up anymore. You just got to push through the pain, but they want to get you mobile right away. They want to get you sitting up, standing. Well, not standing because I wasn't going to stand, but, you know, just get you mobile. And I remember something like day 2 or 3, right after the surgery, where we were starting our physio and pushing through the pain. And I realized how weak I was, and I realized how big this challenge was. And I lied in bed. I don't think I slept that night, you know. And my mind was just racing about, you know, what the hell, you know, like, this is not going to be easy. And I just made that decision then. And it's not like every day was an easy day or every day I was positive, but I had decided at that moment that, you know, I was going to drive forward, that I wasn't going to look backwards and feel sorry for myself or be upset. I was the one that fell off the cliff. I made those decisions. And in life, you get to choose some of the mistakes that you make, and sometimes they just happen to you. And the only choice you have is how you drive forward. So I did make the choice to drive forward even through the hard times. But the challenge that, you know, I mean, we all have.
Hold on one sec. To what do you attribute that strength to be able to make that decision that, hey, my fault. I made this decision. I'm just going to push through it now. What kind of, you know, how do you make that decision? How are you that strong in that moment?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's got to do with community around you, the life I've lived, my parents. You know, I contributed to whatever sort of things influenced you as you grew up. I lived I grew up around a very positive family, a very positive community, and I think through my life, I've always found success in driving through challenges. You know, I've never through my whole life I can say that I've ever had a good moment when I acted, you know, negatively or shitty, you know. And when you empower yourself to recognize that, you know, even in the worst of moments, you know, the best way forward and the way to generate positivity is to just accept and move forward in a positive way. Because as soon as you become somebody that's bitter and blaming, you are really just going to sit in that puddle. Nobody's going to pull you out unless you decide to turn the page or you know, look differently at the perspective. I don't know. I think that you know, it's just my life that lived up to that moment, whether it prepared me or not for it. I just was not going to accept being negative, and because I didn't really feel like there was going to be any pathway there of success. So, you know,
It's also the way to heal too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're approaching it like, okay, I'm going to get better, I'm going to give myself this opportunity, as opposed to beating yourself up.
You know what? I might have even been naive too, because I can remember sitting there, and I mean, I think through my whole life, I've been high on life. I just, you know, if there's one thing that gets me high, it's life. You know, and so when I had that accident and I saw the challenge, I was still riding high on the adrenaline of everything that I was doing in life. And, I was feeding off of that. Maybe I was naive. I just looked at it and went, I'll drive through this just like everything else. And of course, it's a rocky road. I met a lot of challenges, stuff that I didn't realize was going to have a challenge that kind of set me back. And, you had to retweak that attitude. You still have moments where you're going, oh man, can I do this? But, and literally I'd say it took me 4 years to rebuild my life and get it together. But, the getting back to the,
Can I interject just for a second on just how weak you were too? I mean, not that I know how weak you were, but I had a scoliosis in my back, so they did a surgery and straightened my back, which was effectively like breaking my back again. This was in 2005, so I'd retired after Athens in 2004. I did it the following summer, and I went into it. I actually trained for the surgery. So I was doing like 120 miles a week in my racing chair kind of thing. Like I was getting out and getting after it. And it was a, good 1,200 feet of climbing or whatever per 20-mile loop and stuff like that. So it was some legit stuff. And they went to get me up the next day and I felt cut in half. And you think, well, yesterday my arms were strong and I could lift myself up. And I'm on the bed trying to get off of the bed and I could not lift myself up. I'd been through all of the emotional stuff, all of the other stuff that you go through when you break your back. So that wasn't an issue, but I was so weak. And so this is what happened to you. You're the magician's assistant. You've been cut in half and you're so weak. And it's like, you've got to come back from that. Yeah. So this is the situation of like, you're starting from absolute zero, coming from something where you were strong. And so you've got to wonder if it's ever going to change.
And it's an interesting point you make, because that is your first challenge in the beginning. And it's really interesting when you break down the evolution of an injury like that, because the first thing I can think of, the first challenges that I looked at were everything around strength and weakness. My lower body didn't work, couldn't get in and out of bed. You got to learn all those things using half your body. I can remember literally, for months, I would wake up every morning and stare at my toes, move, 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 and I would have dreams, that my toe moved and I'd realize, oh, I'm dreaming. And then I would think I woke up and then my toes moving. And I'm like, no, I'm still dreaming. I would like 6 times wake up in a dream until I realized I was finally awake and no, my toe was not moving,
Or you have that dream where you wake up and you've been walking in your dream and you think, oh, hold on. I've just been approaching this differently. Like I've had an epiphany in this dream. And it's kind of like, okay, well, do you want to kick your legs over the side of the bed and see if you actually learned
give that one a
something
try? See how you do on that face plant. The interesting part is the evolution of that, though, because now if I look back on my life, and I think most people that have had an injury or have a challenge, they have what they call the list. What would you want back first? Like if you had the list of things, what is your list? And if I was to ever write a book, I would title it Walking is Number 4 on my list. It recently went up to 3, but walking is number 4 on my list. And, people are like, number 4, because everybody thinks, it's all about wanting to walk again. Like that's the most important part.
That's how you're whole. If you can walk, then you're normal.
Yeah, that's how you're whole. You're walking again. But the reality is, and I don't know what your list is, but number 1 for me is pain. I'd love to get rid of the pain, the neuro pain that a lot of us encounter after a spinal cord injury, is that driving, burning pain. I don't mind it in my feet. I've got used to it in my feet, but I have it also in my tailbone. And so sitting for me every day is uncomfortable. And I, like most of us, it peaks, ebbs and flows, on a bad day, I literally have to lie sideways and find whatever distraction I can because of the neuro pain that I have on my bum. And I can only think that that's from the fall, but it's never gone away. For 30 years, my ass has been on fire, which does not sound good on a video, but that is the reality. But I don't share that with people. Nobody knows that I'm sitting just like you. But that's my number 1.
I'm lucky in that respect. I mean, this is where we're a little bit different, right? Because I look at you like in a racing chair, and you can go and sit straight up in your racing chair, and I go, oh, that looks so cool. Like you can open up your lungs, you can get a full breath of air, you know, you
Yeah.
can get those
Yeah.
big muscles involved in the you know, but I don't have the pain.
Yeah.
I don't have
It's
any.
varying for everybody, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the lower
Yeah. And
levels often have more pain, the lower
yeah.
level injuries. So,
Anyway, I'll let everybody think about where walking falls is number 4 and what number 2 and 3 are. But yeah, number 4 is on my list. Walking's number 4 on my list. I have 3 other things that I would like to get back before I get to walking, because hey, everything I'm doing, I'm freaking loving it. I mean, from mountain biking to we were talking about it earlier, free diving, skiing, whitewater kayaking that I've done for years and I'm getting back into because my nephew's killing it in whitewater kayaking. I mean, I've lived it, like I have no regrets looking back on my life at how I pushed the limits in every possible way, even with, this injury and the challenges it presents. So on a adventure, living life to the fullest, like I wouldn't undo anything. But going forward, is there a couple things I wouldn't mind changing as far as the pain and 2 and 3? Yeah. I would like to see those ones kicked off the list. But it is what it is. We drive forward.
we're going to get to free diving. I want to get to 7 minutes and 27 seconds under the water, 40 meters, 131 feet
Which is
below the
nothing in the
surface.
sport.
Really? In my world,
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
a gigantic distance. But anyway, I want to get to that, but I still want you to answer that question about going through the airport and
Oh yeah, yeah.
why
Let's
you're
get back
so,
to that.
how you could possibly be so nice to every single person who stopped you with an innocent yet not necessarily informed question.
I can't believe that that's a lasting impression for you, but that makes me feel good.
Well, Canadians are more polite than Americans,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the
I
way
was
it
born in
works.
Texas, though. I shouldn't be this way. I was born in Amarillo, Texas, man. No, perceptual barriers. It was partially that, like I said, I was ready to drive forward in my physical challenge. But the part that hit me in the face was the way people started treating me. They saw a dude in a chair, and they felt sorry for me. I can remember 30 years ago that literally at least once a week, somebody would come up and pray for me. I hope you walk again. I hope you. I hated it. I hated that, anybody feeling sorry for me, anybody wanting to help me. Hey, I'm just a dude in a chair. Come on, like don't treat me any special.
Or you're just a dude.
I'm just a dude. Yeah. And so and I went through a period of time there where I was polite, and then a period of time where I would say stupid things, just to, because you were tired of answering the questions and stuff. And I realized though that when you answer things, non-genuinely and non-caringly, you almost justify whatever perceptions they have,
You
and so
perpetuate it.
if you
Sure.
perpetuate it, so if it's that balance, because if I make it sound like I'm this incredible guy, like, oh, I pushed through this and, I'm challenging myself. If I'm over enthusiastic, I'm suddenly a hero to this person. Like I'm this amazing person that just happened to decide not to kill themselves because they're in a chair. Or if I get a little upset and say, look, come on, like back up, man. Let me just enjoy my day. You don't have, I don't need this sympathy. If you do that, then you justify the fact that, or their perception that people in chairs are upset and bitter at life because they can't walk. And so I just really drove it home with myself that I wanted to be an ambassador of change and seeing people in chairs with a positive light and break down any sympathy, break down any sort of non-ability perceptual barriers, get them to see the person. So, whether it was in the airport with my racer or anything else. And to this day, whether it's about being in a chair or I think the only change in the world that's going to make the biggest difference is all those little things that each and every one of us do to care for each other and be patient and understand each other. If I'm anything, that's what I hope I get remembered by, is just how I accepted people and took the time to really understand and share my story and listen to theirs.
Well, I think that's a great thing. And it's definitely the most memorable
Hmm.
thing, because I remember going through airports with you and going, Kelly stops for every single person and has a meaningful conversation with everyone, which is a challenge when you're often running late and you need to get through,
Yes.
and you're getting this 6 foot long wheelchair that you're pushing in front of you with one hand, holding with one hand, and holding onto the pushing your regular wheelchair with the other hand, and trying to navigate all these people who don't go in the same direction, and then somebody's taking a turn right in front of you and you're trying not to run them over and trying to not to end up upside down and all of these
But we are
things.
rock stars. We are rock stars when it comes to the airports, man. People love traveling with me because we get skirted through every lineup. Oh, over here, sir. Over here, sir. You know, I've timed myself from my house to sitting on a seat in a plane in Kelowna. Now it's a smaller airport, but I have literally been from waking up, alarm went off, jumped in. Now this is without the racer. Jumped in my chair, jumped in the truck, went through, got my ticket, went through security, sitting 28 minutes. 28 minutes from my bed to a seat in a plane. And I mean, this is an international airport where you do have to go through security and stuff. So we just skirt all lineups, man. People love traveling with me.
It is true. That's for sure. Wow. Now it's funny because you talk about walking, is number 4. And I think it was Jim Knob who was a wheelchair racer. He said, why walk when you can fly?
It's awesome.
And it's part of that. And I think it was Knob who said this. But it's true in some ways, right? Because can you talk the audience through your PBs at different distances? So what'd you do the marathon in?
Again, my best marathon in was Boston, 1 hour 24 minutes. But of course, they're crushing those times now, under 1 hour and 20. But that's Boston. Hines, who you spoke about earlier, the machine, man. God, that guy knew how to turn it over like a locomotive in his prime. But he still holds the world record at 1 hour and 20 minutes on a flat course. Boston, of course, does not count as a world record because it's predominantly downhill. But 1 hour and 20 minutes is a world record. My best was 1 hour 24 minutes, which is Boston. So we did Athens in just around 128. I think Kurt was a minute or two, which is mostly uphill. But any fast course is an hour and 30. You're pacing yourself at about I'm not sure what that is. I'm thinking kilometers, but I think the pace is around 2 minutes per kilometer or something like that.
Right. So it's about 3-minute mile kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that's 118. I have actually gone 118, but that was in a really downhill course at St. George in Utah. I hit 50 miles an hour.
I really wanted to do that one.
Oh, it would have been a good one for you because you climbed so much better than I did. There were 3 climbs in it, and I think somebody who could really climb well on that course could conceivably go sub 1 hour.
Yeah. I remember you telling me about that, and I'm like, I got to go there. It was funny. I went to do the old Vegas was similar. You had to do about 10K uphill, and then the rest was literally straight downhill. And I thought I went to Vegas to go, I'm going to go Vegas. I'm going to rip the uphill as hard as I can, puke at the top of the 10K, and then tuck 30K. So I go there, and it's the very first year. Never in the history of that race had they ever had winds. They had winds coming from the opposite direction, gusting up to 30 miles an hour. So I was literally pushing on the downhills. Like it was a DH, and I could barely hold 26, pushing as hard as I could. I was just like, this sucks.
And that's 26K. So that's like sub 15 miles an hour. Yeah.
Oh, it was harsh, pushing as hard as I could to go downhill.
Which for us is sort of the demarcation point. That's like a 4-minute mile is 15 miles an hour. And so
it was harsh. There more than half the field pulled out, couldn't finish it. There was sand. It was basically a sandstorm. Like I was a mess at the end of that race.
Well, you knew you did something afterwards. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What about some of the other distances? How about a 1500, 5K, 10K?
1500, pretty proud of that. I did a 258 something back in when we were racing in Atlanta on the Atlanta course with a bunch of, with Saul and, that group of, and Ernst and Krieg. So 258. And, I think right now, although I think it'll be long before they go below 250. And but I think the sub 3 minute mark is kind of a badge of honor in the 1500. If you've gone under 3 minutes, you've proven yourself capable in that distance. So a bunch of us hit sub 3 and hit 258, and that would have been in like 2003 or something like that. So those records are still pretty significant in the sport of wheelchair racing, to be sub 3 minutes. I think the best, my best course, and the one that really held strong, that showed, my diversity as far as being, really strong on the uphills and I aerodynamically and technical on the downhills, was Peachtree. I loved that race. It showcased everything that was my strength, because we had to hit, as the first 5K is a lot of downhill. So you gotta have your DH dialed in, and have your risk to reward factor dialed in because of the pots, the manholes and the cracks in the road when you're doing 70K on a downhill, or whatever that is, 50 miles an hour on a DH, and you're trying to navigate all the bumps of the roads, and then the rest is uphill. And so you got to grind it out, and a lot of really good battles. So me, Saul, and Kurt were the very first ones. We set ended up being Saul's record, but it was the three of us that punched the time on that one, which was a sub 1850. Nobody had ever gone in 18 minutes and 50 seconds. And I think we did 18. I think Sal was 1832 or 1838, and I was 1842, and Kurt was right in there too. That's fast. That's a fast time.
Which is incredibly fun. So that's for a 10K. So that's 1830 for a 10K, which I think the fastest
just got broken.
Just by Daniel, right? So that's Roman Chuck. Yeah. But you look at that, and it's what the running is 26 or something like that. So that's 8 minutes, almost a mile, almost a minute, a kilometer faster.
Yeah.
That's insane. I mean, that's fast.
I love that race though. It was a grinder, it really came to a battle on that uphill. And I can remember every year it would be Sal, Kurt, Krieg, Ernst, all of us every year just grinding it out, trying to, attacking on each other and puking going on the uphill, because it's, you're pushing, you're redlining that whole thing. And then you got to save just enough to be that guy that crosses first. So Peachtree was a fun race.
Talking about times, what is it like to hold your breath for 7 minutes and 27 seconds?
It goes back to that whole Zen thing I was telling you about. But there was more pain in that than most things I've done, to having to push through it. But it's understanding the physiology of holding your breath too. A lot of people will say, how are you not doing brain damage? But reality is you're not cutting yourself off from oxygen. You're basically, your body is managing the usage of the oxygen that you're storing in your lungs. It's not much different than somebody going to Everest. Kilimanjaro, I'm sure you went through some sort of acclimation to the lower oxygen levels, and that's what your body does, and it has to acclimate. I mean, somebody sitting on Everest at camp, whatever, third camp, they're actually at a higher risk, because they're at weeks of sitting there at low oxygen levels, whereas I'm only, a freediver's only limiting, themselves through minutes. And so to push, you don't just go out and hold your breath for, 7 minutes without sort of understanding what it takes. Yeah. You're definitely working up to it. So for me, I've always had a fascination with holding my breath. Don't ask me why. I don't know. It was just one of those challenges. Anytime I got into a pool as a kid, I would hold my breath and, till it hurt. But I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I probably pushed 2 minutes on my own without knowing what I was doing. And, but anytime my body, because your body will tell you, hey, breathe, dumbass, breathe. And that's what they call a convulsion. It's, your body convulsing, telling your body your lungs and you to breathe, take in some air, man, I want air. But you can push past that. And that's what, you get trained to learn what that is and to relax it and push past it. And so when I was younger, I listened to that. I went, ooh, okay, this can't be good. So I, stopped the breath hold. But when you get into free diving, you'll understand you learn the physiology of it, and they teach you how to, first of all, pack your lungs. So, and again, for me, the fascination was, wow, I can hold my breath longer. I'm in, I want to do this, So you learn how to do the slow breathe up, which is key to basically expelling the CO2 in your lungs and increasing the percentage of O2 in your lungs. So you go through a breathe up phase, and that's anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes, sometimes longer, but generally 2 to 5 minutes. And then also when you're doing that, you also learn techniques of how to pack your lungs. So how to put as much into your lungs as possible. And there's all kinds of different techniques, stretches, things that you learn along the way to prepare you for putting as much O2 into your lungs as possible. And so I went to Kona to learn all that stuff. And just within one lesson, I went from 2 minutes to 4 minutes. They thought I was insane, that I was able to jump to 4 minutes just like that. But I credited two things. This was after my, marathon racing. So my resting heart rate was already down to something like 32, 38. I had a ridiculous low resting heart rate when I was relaxed. And I have big lungs, it was just a genetic thing with being a marathoner. So it kicked in pretty quick for me to be able to hold my breath at a ridiculous sort of amount. And then I just evolved with the sport. I went to the Caymans and they were doing a competition down there. And so the depths that you were talking about, these guys that you have to learn a lot of other techniques because you're dealing with pressure when you go down. You got to know how to equalize, which I still am terrible at. So I had the breath hold to go and do 300 or 400 feet, which is what the maximum, the guys that are really good or guys and gals that are doing it, they're past 300 feet. I was having a tough time pushing past 120, 130 because, that pressure in your head and you're trying to equalize. And, when your lungs are this big at surface, they go down to this big. As you get further and further down, they compress. And you're upside down. You're trying to take that little pocket of air that's in your lungs and bring it down to your head and equalize your sinuses. It's very difficult maneuver to do, and I just was not able to do it. So I could hit 130 feet. I had the breath hold to do more, but getting back to the breath hold, you do all of that, and then I could go 4 minutes without actually even feeling like I wanted to breathe. I could hit 4 minutes and I'd be still holding my breath, going, "All right, this is good," and then I'd hit my first convulsion. And your first convulsions are your strongest ones. That's when your body's first saying, breathe. But once you push past it, you can then start pushing through those and relaxing through the convulsions of your body wanting to, snap you out of it. And then after that, it's just taking stock of the not passing out. You have to take stock of, am I still, am I going to black out, or, how much conscious do I have left? Because the very last mechanism that your body has is that it uses the last remaining bit of O2 to function your mind, and everything else starts to fail. I think they call it a samba. If you ever watched somebody that's about to pass out, you'll see them. They look like a drunk. They're doing all this, and it's basically your body slowly just driving all the O2 left for your brain. So. Which sounds crazy, I know. But as soon as you pass out, you wake up and boom, it's all over. But that doesn't count.
Part of what you're doing when you're doing this is you're getting out the CO2, right? I mean, this is your breathe up where you're getting rid of the CO2, because the CO2 is the stuff that becomes painful. It's that burn that we relate to, right? That's telling you, no, breathe in, breathe this stuff out, breathe this in.
Everybody's felt that if they've held their breath. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's felt it at every point. So, I mean, you keep talking about Zen. Is there a Zen that comes from this, and has this affected any of what you do afterwards? Are you able to bring yourself into a more centered kind of position in the face of stress, in the face of whatever, as a result of what you've done? Is it training that has a practical application in the rest of your life?
I think so. We all of us have different experiences, and we can apply them in different ways in our life. But for sure, one of the practical application to life is dealing with stress. Dealing with high intense moments and learning how to calm yourself. And even though whether it's preparing for a competition, preparing for a test, or in the moment something happens, taking stock of your anxiety, taking stock of that stress, you have to teach yourself how to breathe, how to center yourself. And even though it's in a controlled environment for free diving, that's exactly what you're doing. So you go through a mental sort of preparation to, you're trying to relax yourself as fully as you can. So the breath holds where I did 727 is completely static. They call it the static breath hold. So basically you're lying in a pool and you're doing your breathe up. And then when you take your breath in, your final big push and inhale, you just float in the water with your head down. You look basically like you're dead. You know, you're just relaxing completely. So when I'm upside down with my face down like that and holding my breath, my arms are just hanging, completely relaxed. And that's what you have to do. You have to put yourself in a meditative state. And people always ask, well, what are you thinking about? How do you relax yourself? And, you know, everybody's a little bit different in what it is that relaxes them. But I think the best way to describe it is that you're not thinking of anything. Anything that goes through your mind, you're letting it pass. Because as soon as your mind sticks on something, then you're thinking. And then you don't control necessarily your emotions or your whatever when you start to actually dig into thinking something. So when I'm in a meditative state like that, where I'm just really trying to, allow my body to be as relaxed as possible, I just let thought pass through me. I don't allow it to stick on anything. I focus on breathing. I focus on, am I relaxing? You may think you're relaxing, and the next thing you know, oh no, actually my shoulders are tense. Oh, I'm actually clenching. So I'm very focused on, is my body fully relaxed, and not letting anything, and just letting my mind wander as fully as possible. So it's a meditative state that, practical. Yeah, I think teaching ourselves how to relax and in stressful moments is always practical.
Have you always been good at that, or is that something that you became good at as a result of free diving or became better?
I became good at that because of this accident. I would say more than anything, because I didn't have a lot of patience when I was younger. I was very, go, 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 go. And so when I had this accident, you have to learn a whole new level of patience with yourself, with society, with how long it takes. I love doing things on my own, and I will always find a creative way to build something, do something so that I can maintain my independence. But what would take an able-bodied person, an hour will take me 3 to 4 hours, maybe even a day, just because I have to drag the material over, and I have to, it takes me figure out a way to, actually do this without having the ability to do it. So you come up with these creative ways to actually achieve something. And so learning to calm myself became a necessity after this accident. And then, you just drive that into every other sort of venture you're doing.
And you've maintained that, because sometimes it's what you do to deal with the initial accident, right? The initial accident and the huge change in your life. But then things get a little bit easier. And, it's like, yeah, it might take you a little bit longer than it takes an able-bodied person, but within our world, you're on the high end of things. I remember watching you, like, getting like we're leaving the track and you'd stand up to put your sweatpants on, and I was like, oh, like that's kind of cool. Like that seems like, as opposed to me sort of like wrestling with my pants to pull them up, like as I'm sitting in my chair, lift myself up on the wheels and pull them up. And, balance is relatively good, but you never really know if it's going to work. And so,
Yeah.
but you've been able to maintain that throughout the years, because it's been what, 30 years or so now, right?
Coming up 29, will be 30 soon. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I honestly, if we're not evolving in our life, if we're not honing our mind, our body will be our body, but it's driven by our mind. So, I continue to evolve myself in ways that make me a better person, allow me to enjoy life more. But I think, that ability to calm yourself and deal with stress, particularly if you are a person that does push the limits, and a lot of the things you do, you have to, especially in the risk reward, you have to calm yourself. You have to understand what the risks are. And then if you are going to take those risks, being in the right state of mind. So I think in a lot of stuff that I do, yeah, it's very key, so that I'm trying to keep myself out of the hospital.
Well, it's it. And I think physiologically, you give yourself a good chance to be healthy as well, right? Because we hold so much of that stress. This becomes ulcers. This becomes, hypertension, whatever it is. stress seems like a fairly decent transition to what you do professionally, which is one of the most stressful jobs out there, right? As an air traffic controller. I mean, there are a lot of people who have a lot of trouble with that stress. How did you get to be an air traffic controller? How did this work out, and how long have you been doing it?
I was a pilot first. So I was a commercial pilot for 2 years prior to my accident, doing fire patrols. I'd go out in a small little plane, and I would grid fires that maybe were sparked up from lightning storms the previous day. And I loved it. It was great. It was an adventure. You know, I loved flying small planes and going out on a mission to, if we found a fire, I would map it. And sometimes we'd have to fly low level and to mark the location and the access point from roads for the ground crews. I'd have to throw biodegradable toilet paper out the windows to mark in the trees the pathway from the road to the fire, because they can't always see it, the small smokers. I loved it. So that was my first career, really, was a commercial pilot. And when I had my accident, long story short, that just wasn't an avenue to pursue. There was a lot of perceptual barriers to push down, being a pilot in a chair, stuff like that. And I gave it a shot for about a year or two, trying to push those perceptual barriers down. And I just thought, you know what, I want to get on with my life. And I don't, this is not going to be that avenue without a long fight. And so I made the choice to go to the other end and get on the mic. And it's been a good choice. But being an air traffic controller, I think one of the greatest perceptual errors out there is how much stress it is to be an air traffic controller. And we love it because we get paid well for dealing with what we have to do. But the reality is you go through some extensive training, and if you don't pass that training, you don't get the license to be an air traffic controller. And so when you get to that point that you know how to do this job, you do it very confidently and effectively. And you have moments where, you see the traffic building and it's a little bit of a gut check, but all your training teaches you how to separate and manage the flow of that traffic. And early on, there was probably a few stressful things, but it's mostly just mentally draining. When you work heavy traffic, at the end of the day, your brain's fried, which was perfect for my marathon training, because I didn't need my brain to go out and do 30, 40, 50K, just let the brain turn off and then go into my Zen mode. But so it was a perfect balance. These days, technology that has changed air traffic control. There's so much, it's that blend of the human interaction to a computer assistance to allow you to just make better decisions and manage the traffic better. So great career for me. And when you're good at something, you don't feel the stress the same way.
Are you different in that by virtue of your sport, or a lot of the people who do that, do they have similar kinds of backgrounds to you?
I think that was probably one of the things that I'm most proud of, and the fact that probably was my biggest disadvantage too, was that I held a full-time job through my whole racing career, which most of the guys that I competed at, their full-time job was racing. So I didn't realize what a disadvantage that was until I got closer to Athens and was really starting to push the miles more and more and more. And still working a full-time job, my recoveries were not really where they needed to be. I needed to find ways to recover better. And when you work full-time, you don't get the same recovery. So I ended up taking 3 months off prior to Athens. And it amazed me what a difference it is to be able to train, focus on training, recover, and that becomes your life. Everything you're doing is about performance. And I mean, I was already at that state, but I had to blend it into a full-time job as too. And when I retired, it was mainly because I just couldn't balance the two out. I was like, I can't do a full-time career air traffic controller and be a full-time high-performance athlete. The two together were taking their toll on me, and I chose the one with the retirement plan.
Which makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can make some money as a wheelchair racer, but you make some money, and there's no guarantee year over year that you're going to continue to make money. And oftentimes equipment is really expensive, travel is expensive, different things like that. And it was a great thing to be able to do. So as you get older, you look at it and you think, I don't really want to stop. And you've done so many things. You're strategic right now. It sounds like you're mostly in the mountain biking side of things. Like this is the big thing, which I'd imagine is as mentally challenging as it is physically, and probably more mentally challenging sometimes. Is that what's next, or is there something else that is going to be next, the thing that will continue to keep you young?
It's a combination of the two. It's a good question, really, because we all have to be driving towards something. I mean, the idea of retirement from air traffic control just to do nothing doesn't excite me at all. So, air traffic control has been my funder. I've enjoyed the career, but it's been my funder of everything that I do. That's my base, financial base of everything I'm doing. But, when that last day comes, my real focus is really around creating an adventure lifestyle, with friends. And I mean, it's why I'm here right now in this lodge with my buddy that's taking up this, this journey and this challenge of running this lodge and turning it into an adventure center here in Golden, BC. I'm living off of that dream right there, is the idea of, I really want to expand my adventure creativity and share that with people. Just coming here now, my creative juices are flowing, and the idea of what we could do in a place like this. There's mountain biking here, there's whitewater kayaking here, there's paragliding here, and then there's the ski side of it. And they're doing adaptive trails here too. So whether you're doing a two-wheel bike like I'm in, or you're jumping on a four-wheeler. So my idea of pushing the next limit is to continue pushing what I'm doing on an adventure level, but sharing more of it. I want to spend a lot more time sort of bringing people into, that adventure lifestyle. I feel like, life is way more fun if you just figure out ways that are, to enjoy to the fullest, and it doesn't have to be extreme. It just has to be, the idea. I love playing video games too, but man, there's nothing more than real fun. The real adventure of being out and feeling wind in your face, or even mud in your face, and a little bit of blood. I mean, coming back from a hard ride where you got mud, blood, and tears and sweat. Those are the stories that you sit around a campfire and you can look back at your life and feel, pretty accomplished and satisfied and content. So, I think really I'm just gonna continue working with, I haven't mentioned his name, but Bjorning, I didn't mention it, but the Crank Bike guys and his stuff. I want to see where we can go, whether you're able-bodied or not. I think that he's got a great thing as far as dual sport technology that allow you to put his equipment on any bike, but also I think we can throw that onto adaptive stuff too. So get people out on trails, and then just bringing communities together. That's kind of where I'm going. I'll stay young. I'm gonna bike with young people and inspire everybody.
Is part of it just showing people that you can do it? Is that sort of similar to your conversations that you have in the airport?
I don't know if it's showing people, what I mean, inspiring people. I think the important thing when I used to do my talks, I really didn't want to talk about what my accomplishments were. What I wanted to do was share messages in life that allowed me to enjoy life to the fullest. So when I do stuff like this, I want that to translate into whatever that might be for somebody else that gives them a high. It could be art, it could be anything, but the idea is to inspire people. Because people will look at you and go, "That's nuts," but they're still inspired. They may not want to do what you're doing, but I do want to get people trying some of this stuff, because I think that the technology is there for people to try it. And so, but whatever that translates into, the idea is to just open up people's minds and see where it goes for them.
Well, because you are human too. I mean, we've gone through so many of the amazing things that you've done that are sort of, some of them are a little bit head scratching, for a lot of us, the speed skiing, the free diving, some of this stuff where you go, that you're playing for real. Like there could be some real ramifications if things go badly there. But at the same time, you're part of what's great about you is that you're a human being, and that you do some things that are really great, but you struggle along the way, and you're willing to try to figure out how to
Yeah.
get where you want to go. And people can easily see a finished product. I think that that's sometimes the problem, is that they either see the guy in the wheelchair where they go, "Oh, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. Maybe there'll be a cure," or they see the guy, you know, in the racing chair going 120 for a
Yeah.
marathon and go, well, you're Superman, you know, and the truth is that you have your moments of being Superman, but you really are somebody who's a real human. You're mostly Clark Kent, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's I'm going to spin that into a story. It makes me think about, you know, being an ambassador, like you said, and I feel like it's the same way here. Since I've been on an e-bike, it's been a really interesting thing to be. The e-bike industry's kind of gone through a little bit of a, you know, a revolution and an evolution itself. You know, when it first came out, there was a lot of anti-e-bikers out there, purists. They're like, oh no, you can't have e-bikes; they're going to wreck the trails and stuff. And here I am jumping on an e-bike, and you know, I'm going out where even on places where they don't allow e-bikes, you know, I'm kind of pulling my accessibility card a little bit, and it's, you know, I don't want to pull that, but that is the reality of how I get out there. I can't do it any other way. So most accept that, and I'm really just another person on a bike, but I happen to use a motor to help me get through, and so it's been accepting. But not everybody sees that, and I there have been a bunch of times I'll be riding by and my e-bike isn't as quiet as some of the other ones, and they'll know it's an e-bike, and they'll look at me and they'll go, cheater, cheater, why don't you get a real bike, you know? And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I'm just a guy riding a bike, you know, and here I am again, another perceptual barrier I got to break down. I remember riding in Whistler, and we were doing, I mean, people are going up chairlifts. How am I any more of a cheater than somebody that's going up a chairlift so that they can ride down? So we're doing the DH, and I come rolling out of a berm, a run, and there's no trees around. There's nothing. I'm kind of ahead of the pack that I was with. And there's a guy there, and he sees my motor. And he says, oh, cheater, you know, kind of says jokingly. I was like, yeah, it is what it is, you know, sort of thing. I can't really stop. I'm looking for a tree, and I can't. So I lost my, thinking about him and what he said, I lost my balance there and kind of lost my focus, and I fell over. You know, I'm like 10 feet away from him, and I kind of fall over, hit the dirt, and then he's looking at me kind of strange, and I kick my feet out of the, you know, out of the clips and stuff, and I kind of crawl over, and he's like, you all right? And I'm like, oh no, I'm partially paralyzed, so, you know, that's why I use an e-bike. He's like, ah, I'm such an asshole, you know, like, I feel so bad. Let me take my foot out of my mouth. And I said, hey, it's okay. I said, but the reality is, it doesn't really matter if I'm in a, you know, if I'm disabled or not. I mean, an e-bike is just a person out riding. He's like, you're right, actually. I'm actually already thinking of getting one. So it's just so funny how, you know, you have to push these barriers of acceptance, and people always look at the negative side. I got to tell you this other story it made me think of this. It's so funny, Chris, you'll love it. And it's all about perception again, but this one had such a funny twist. So last year I was riding really, really well. I was getting to the point where I'm starting to get air. I'm starting to push the speed, technically running it through, you know, some tight spot, and, you know, starting to get to the point where I'm going to challenge myself on some of the more extreme features at bike parks. You know, they have the big ramps, they have the jumps. So there was this one trail, I think it's called World Cup in Silver Star, and it has this big, you know, you have those banked wooden berms, but you know, some are gentle and you can ride even if you don't have speed, you just ride on it. This one was so banked, it was at least 80 degrees, almost 90, like almost vertical. And the only way you can hit this one is with G-forces. You have to hit this with speed, and you have to hold the line. And I'd been down that run before, and I went by it. I went, nope, not doing that. Risk to reward, not worth it. As we were coming up though, this last year, I'm riding so well, my confidence is high, and I knew that was coming up. And in my head, it's so funny how your mind works. I'm riding hard, and I'm thinking about that thing coming up, and I'm like, I'm gonna do it, man. I can do it. No, risk to reward, man. Risk to reward. No, you can do it. It's worth it. It's gonna be fun. You're gonna nail it. So I see it come around the turn, and there it is. And I made my decision. I'm going for it. So let off the brakes, hit a little throttle, brap it down to the ramp, get on this thing. I'm freaking sideways holding the G-forces on this thing. And I'm like, oh man, this was a bad idea. Like, I'm barely hanging on. And then I look ahead of me, and there's a bike leaned up against the ramp in the middle of this feature. There is no outs. I can't even turn the bike to even think about an out. I'm like, in my head instantly, can I swear? Am I allowed to swear on this thing? I'm effed. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? Like, in a second, you know, like the world freezes in my head. I'm effed. I got no outs here. I got too much G-forces in here. I'm barely hanging on as it is. So as I come up to this thing, I try my best to pop a little wheelie to try and jump it and stuff. all it did was just smash into this bike, corkscrews me. My bike flies off me and hits a tree, snaps the handlebars. I go flying off to the right, like this. And I kind of came out of it and, bruised, but nothing broke and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, that was insane. And I start crawling back to my bike, and all of a sudden the guy whose bike that was in the middle comes running over. He's like, oh man, are you all right? Are you all right? And he sees me crawling. He says, can you walk? And I'm like, no, man, I can't walk. You can't walk? Oh man, are you hurt? And I'm like, no, I'm partially paralyzed. And he's like, you're paralyzed? Oh my God. The guy's just freaking out, and I'm just being all casual. And he's like, and I'm like, no, I've always been paralyzed, man. It's like, he's like, I don't get it. What do you want me to do? I'm like, get your bike off the trail, man. That's what I want you to do. Get your bike off the trail. Oh, it's just the most hilarious moment in the world. I wish my GoPro died out just before that run. If I had that on video, it would be viral, man. It was just the funniest thing. And that guy followed me around like a lost puppy for the rest of the day, just wanted to learn about the e-bike, wanted to learn about my, this whole setup, and he felt bad, again, I could have been really mad at that guy, but ain't gonna change the moment. So I just embraced it and, became a friend with that guy and just kind of hung out the rest of the day and rode. It was funny. I had to go buy a new handlebar. So
you were effectively beached though. I mean, like,
yeah. Oh yeah. It was funny. Yeah.
You couldn't go anywhere.
No. So the guys that I was riding, they came up behind me, and these are all high level guys, one is CEO of an engineering company. And then we got Steve here who's running this business now. We call him Hillsy. They're both sort of high dynamic guys. And so Hillsy jumps into controlling the event mode. He's like, he's gone up there. Any bikers coming down, he's waving them off, and he's controlling the event, telling people what to do. And then Bernie jumps into, engineer mode, and he's looking at my bike and grabs a stick and starts fixing the handlebars enough that I could ride it back down. So we got my bike going, and I figured out a way to ride it down with one handlebar broken and the other one still kind of, functioning, and went to the shop and put a new handlebar on. But you got to be creative. Man, you got to be creative. It was hilarious.
Well, Kelly, it's absolutely awesome to catch up with you. It's been far too long. Thank you for your stories. Thank you for doing all this stuff. I mean, it's so cool looking at everything that you've done. And it's a great reminder to me, and I'd imagine everybody else, that it really is an adventure. Like, let's find a way to do what we want to do. And sometimes you have to be a little bit more creative to do it. So.
Yeah, and thanks to all those guys out there. I don't enjoy Facebook and social media, but I do enjoy looking at all the adventures and all the other people out there that are pushing the limits. There's some really, really good stuff, with all the different adaptive equipment that's coming out and pushing the limits. And I just love the transformation of attitudes. There's so many positive attitudes and people pushing the limits now. And, those are all ambassadors for change. And, we've gone a long ways to when me and you, maybe we're first in a chair, and where the predominant perception was something else. And we've had to go a long way to get to where we are today. And it's nice to, to see that happening, and happy to be part of it, happy to continue being part of it. And maybe we'll all hook up again here soon.
Look forward to it, and look forward to what this next generation is going to do too, because they've been blowing my mind. So it's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Very much.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, buddy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great time there.